I remember the look on his face that evening. Not the first time I saw him, but the moment everything finally broke open between us. The cafe was almost empty, the lights warm and dim, our reflections soft in the window glass. His hands were resting on the table, still and calm, but his eyes carried something heavy. Not anger, not sorrow, something deeper, like a truth that had waited too long. He said my name so quietly, I almost missed it. And that was when I realized I had been wrong about him from the very beginning. But I guess I should start from the beginning, before I knew who he really was, before I knew who I really was when I stood beside him. Back then, life was simple in the ways that life only appears simple when you're inside it. I lived in a small one-bedroom apartment above a florist shop downtown, the kind of place where you can hear the traffic in the mornings and the laughter of strangers at night. The wallpaper was faded, and the water pipes had a personality of their own, but the sunlight came in at just the right angle through the window, warming the floorboards like a quiet blessing. I liked that. I was 28, working as a barista in a cafe that smelled of warm pastry and cinnamon most days. It was one of those local places, tucked between a boutique clothing shop and a bookstore that always seemed on the edge of going out of business. The cafe itself wasn't anything grand. The furniture didn't match. The tile floor was cracked along the counter, but the air held the scent of roasted beans and hope. My days had a rhythm. Open the cafe at 7, grind the beans, set the pastries in their case, smile, listen, make lattes with little hearts in foam, pretend they mattered. I used to think I was content. Maybe I was. I didn't come from money. I didn't come from comfort either. I was raised by my grandmother, a soft-spoken woman with hands that always smelled of lavender soap. She taught me that kindness was something you carry with you, not something you put on when people are watching. She taught me to take pride in simple things, like cleaning a counter until it shines, or remembering someone's favorite drink. Maybe that's why I liked the cafe so much. People came there wanting warmth, and I knew how to give it. Still, there were days I felt something pressing quietly behind my ribs. A longing I couldn't describe. Not loneliness, not exactly. More like the feeling that my life was waiting for something, though I had no idea what. I first saw him on a Tuesday morning in early spring. The weather had just begun to soften, the air not as sharp as the weeks before. I was wiping down tables, humming something without knowing the words. A bell over the door chimed, and I looked up automatically, expecting the usual faces. Instead, I saw someone unfamiliar. He looked out of place in that cafe. His coat was too well tailored, the kind of dark wool that didn't catch lint. His shoes were polished. His hair was neat, though a little wind-tousled, as if he had been walking for a while. But it was his eyes that caught me, not their color, but the way he seemed to be searching for something. He approached the counter slowly, like he was stepping into a memory rather than a shop. He didn't look like the type who bought his own coffee. He looked like the type who had assistants, drivers, schedules, a life built in layers far above mine. So I smiled at him, the way I smiled at everyone. Gentle, warm, neutral enough not to pry. "Good morning," I said. "What can I get started for you?" He hesitated, just a fraction of a second before answering. "Whatever you recommend." I remember being amused by that. Most people knew exactly what they wanted, but I nodded and began preparing a cappuccino, my go-to choice for someone new. He watched quietly, though not in the way that made you uncomfortable. More like he was studying the moment itself, taking it in. When I handed him the cup, our fingers almost touched. Just almost. He thanked me. His voice was low and calm. And then, instead of sitting inside, he took a seat at one of the outdoor tables, where the morning light spilled across the sidewalk. I watched him through the window for a moment. Just a moment. I didn't think anything of him. People came and went every day. But he came back the next day, and the day after that, never ordering the same drink twice, never saying much, just watching the world with a quiet presence that I couldn't quite read. Some of the regulars noticed him too. An older woman who came in every morning for chamomile tea leaned toward me once and whispered with a hint of curiosity, "Is that one of your admirers?" I laughed it off. I didn't think of him that way. But something about him unsettled me, not in a bad sense, in the sense of a door opening somewhere I didn't know existed. One morning, after nearly 2 weeks of seeing him, he approached the counter as usual. But this time, instead of asking me to choose his drink, he asked, "Do you have a moment?" I hesitated. It was busy and I had work to do. But there was something in his tone, not demanding, just sincere. "I'm sorry," I said, maybe too quickly. "I really can't talk right now." His expression didn't change. He simply nodded, thanked me, and left his usual payment in the jar. I didn't think much of it then, but that was the moment I rejected him. The moment I unknowingly pushed away the man who owned not only the cafe, but the entire building I worked in. The man who was about to change the course of my life. I didn't think about him much for the rest of that day. Life moved in its usual rhythm, full of small tasks and passing conversations. I steamed milk, wiped counters, laughed politely at a joke I'd already heard 3 times from one of the regulars. The cafe hummed with its familiar routine. But the next morning, when I opened the doors at 7, I found him already there, standing outside, hands in his coat pockets, looking at the closed sign like it was a locked diary he was waiting to read. I startled a little. "Oh, good morning," I said, fumbling with the keys. He smiled, but only slightly. "Good morning." We stood there for a moment, just breathing the cool dawn air. I didn't know what to do with the silence between us, so I unlocked the door and pushed it open, letting the warm scent of yesterday's coffee grounds unfurl into the street. "You can come in," I offered, "but it'll take a few minutes before everything's ready." "That's all right," he said. "I don't mind waiting." There was something about the way he said it. Soft, steady, real. People rarely spoke like that. Not anymore. Not without rushing. Not without trying to sound like something. He took a seat at the far corner table, the one by the window, where the morning sun moved in slow golden stages across the wooden floor. I worked in quiet motion for a while, turning on the machines, unstacking cups, straightening the pastry trays. I could feel him watching sometimes, but it wasn't uncomfortable. More like he was watching a story unfold. When the first batch of espresso finished brewing, I walked over to him. "Today," I said, "you're getting a flat white." He smiled again, that same restrained upward curve. "I'll trust your judgment." I made it for him. He took a sip, and something softened in his expression, just barely. It felt like a reward, but I didn't know him, not really, so I didn't let the moment become anything more. Over the next week, we fell into a quiet rhythm. Not friends, not strangers, something in between. He always sat at the same table. I always prepared his drink. We didn't speak much, but there was a kind of gentle recognition in it. One afternoon, the cafe was slow, and sunlight filled the room in warm, honey-colored streaks. I was wiping down the counter when he finally asked, "May I know your name?" I looked up, a little startled that it had taken this long. "Emma," I said. "My name is Emma." He repeated it softly, like tasting it. "Emma." Then he said his own name, Daniel. I remember liking how simple it sounded. Straightforward, uncomplicated. At the time, I had no idea how complicated his world really was. One evening, after closing, I found my coworker, Mara, leaning against the counter, grinning at me with a glint of curiosity. "So," she said, "your mystery man came in again today." "He's not my anything," I replied, rolling my eyes. "He watches you like you're the only person in the room," she teased. I shrugged, pretending not to care. "He's just thoughtful, quiet. I don't know. There's something different about him." Mara laughed. "Different like romantic movie slow burn, or different like he's a spy?" I smiled. "I haven't figured that out yet." The truth was, I felt something when he was around. Not sparks exactly. Something steadier, like the warmth of a lamp in a dim room. Familiar, soft, safe. But that scared me. Safe things had a way of disappearing, and I hadn't let myself want anything real in a very long time. So I kept a little distance, enough to feel him near, but not enough to fall. Then came the day everything shifted, even if at the time it felt like just a small moment. It was a Thursday afternoon, and rain tapped softly against the cafe windows. The air smelled like pavement and espresso and damp wool coats. The cafe was comfortably busy, a gentle hum of conversation and clinking ceramic. Daniel was already seated in his usual spot. But something was different. His posture was tense, his jaw set, his eyes far away, like he was fighting some invisible noise in his mind. I placed his drink in front of him. "Everything okay?" He blinked, as if returning from somewhere distant. "Yes," he said. "Just a long day." I nodded. I didn't ask more. I never pressed him. But then, after a pause, he looked up at me and said, "Have you ever felt like your life is being decided without you?" The question caught me completely off guard. I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Yes," I said quietly, "more times than I'd like to admit." His expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough to show something inside him eased. But before I could say anything more, someone interrupted. A man in an expensive suit walked into the cafe, confident, loud, and sharp-edged. The type who thought the room belonged to him before he even entered it. He went straight to Daniel. "There you are," the man said. "I've been trying to reach you. The board wants an answer before Friday." Daniel's entire demeanor shifted. Not fear, not surprise, resignation. He rose from his chair without looking back at me and followed the man outside. No goodbye, no explanation, just gone. Like he had been swept back into a world I didn't understand. I stood there, watching them from behind the counter, my hands resting on a still warm mug, and something inside me tightened in a way I couldn't explain. Because, for the first time, I realized I wanted to know him. Really know him. And wanting something is always the beginning of change. The next morning, I tried not to expect him. I told myself it was silly to care whether a stranger walked into the cafe. People leave, people drift. Life doesn't pause because someone's seat is suddenly empty. I knew these things. I had learned them the hard way, so I opened the cafe like always. Brewed the coffee, set the cups, placed fresh flowers in the little jar on the counter. Because small beauty matters, even when nothing else does. But every time the door chimed, my heart lifted just a little. And every time it wasn't him, it lowered just a little too. I felt ridiculous. When Mara came in for her shift, she took one look at my face and raised a single eyebrow. "He didn't come in this morning." "I didn't say that," I replied, a little sharper than I intended. She only smiled, amused. Or the next? By the fourth day, I had convinced myself that whatever he had needed, whatever quiet thing he had been reaching for in this place, he had found it, or lost it, and moved on. That was fine. People drift. Life goes on. Except that evening, when the last customer left and the cafe lights hummed softly above me, I felt the emptiness of his absence, like a missing piece of a song I had started to learn by heart. I didn't want to admit that losing something I never had could still hurt. It was the fifth morning when everything changed. The weather had turned warmer, and sunlight pooled across the floor in soft stripes. I was wiping down the tables when I heard the bell over the door. I didn't look up right away. I had taught myself not to look. But then I heard his voice. "Good morning, Emma." It wasn't rushed, it wasn't uncertain, just warm, steady, familiar. I looked up, and there he was. He looked tired in a way I hadn't seen before. Not physically, but somewhere deeper. The kind of tired you feel in your spirit, not your bones. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then I smiled. "Good morning, Daniel." The cafe was nearly empty. Only an older couple sat near the window, sipping coffee in a slow, comfortable silence. Everything felt strangely still, like the world had paused to make room for this one small moment. I went to make his usual drink, though he had never ordered the same thing twice. Today I made him the cappuccino he'd had on his first morning here. Something about it felt right. When I placed the cup before him, he didn't reach for it. He just looked at me. "May I ask you something?" he said. My breath caught, but I nodded. "Do you always treat people with such kindness?" The question surprised me. I wasn't sure how to answer. "I don't treat people kindly," I said softly. "I treat them as if they matter." He blinked. It was a small thing, but something shifted in his face, something unguarded. He looked down at the cup, then back at me. "You have no idea," he murmured, "how rare that is." We talked, for the first time, truly talked. Not small things or polite things. He asked about my grandmother, and I told him about the lavender soap and the way she hummed while drying dishes. He asked about my dreams, and I admitted I wanted to open a bakery one day. Not something big, something warm, something like home. I didn't ask many questions in return, not because I didn't want to know, but because I sensed that whatever he carried, he wasn't ready to put down yet, and I wasn't going to push him. The world does enough pushing. But then, something happened that I wasn't expecting. A woman walked in. Not a customer, not someone from the neighborhood. She was wearing a sleek navy suit and holding a leather folder. Her hair was styled in a perfect twist at the back of her head. She walked with purpose, straight to Daniel's table. "Mr. Hale," she said, "you're needed at the office." Everything in me stilled. Not Mr. Hale, not office, not that tone. Daniel's eyes flicked to mine, just for a second, and in that second, I realized something. There were entire worlds in his life I knew nothing about. He stood slowly, calm, controlled. "I'll be there shortly," he said. The woman hesitated, then nodded and stepped outside. He turned back to me. "I'm sorry," he said. Quiet, sincere. I nodded, even though something inside me felt shaken. "Of course." He reached for his coat, paused, and then he spoke the words that would echo in me long after he walked out the door. "I would like to see you again. Not here, somewhere else. Dinner, maybe, or a walk." My heart rose and tightened because I didn't know who he really was, and I was afraid of wanting too much, afraid of wanting him. So I did the only thing that felt safe. I took a step back, and I said, softly, gently, "I'm sorry, Daniel. I don't think that's a good idea." His face didn't fall, but something in his eyes changed. Not hurt, not anger, understanding. But understanding can feel like loss, too. He nodded once, then he left. And I stood there, surrounded by the quiet, wondering why saying no felt like the beginning of something, rather than the end. After that day, the air in the cafe felt different. Not heavier, not lighter, just charged, like the space between words when two people understand something neither of them will say out loud. I told myself I had made the right decision, that I needed to protect my quiet life, my careful routines, the small sense of peace I had built. But the truth was simpler. I was afraid of being seen too clearly, and Daniel had a way of looking at me like he could see the rooms in me I kept closed. For 3 days, he didn't come back. I didn't expect him to, not after the way I ended things. But on the 4th day, when I stepped out from behind the counter to refill the napkin dispenser, the bell above the door chimed, and there he was. Only this time, he didn't walk to his usual table. He walked to me. "Good morning," he said. His tone wasn't tentative or searching. It was warm, steady, like we were simply continuing something. I gave a small nod. "Good morning." The cafe was quiet for once. Rain tapped against the windows. Soft piano music played on the speakers. He slid his hands into his coat pockets. "I didn't come here to ask again," he said. "I just wanted to see how you're doing." The words caught me off guard. Kindness is disarming when it's real. "I'm all right," I said. "Thank you." He nodded. Then after a brief pause, "Could I just have a coffee to go? Whatever you'd like to make." To go. Something in my chest eased. He wasn't trying to stay. He wasn't trying to push. He was just trying to stay connected. I made him a caramel latte with just a hint of cinnamon. Comfort in a cup. When I handed it to him, our eyes met for just a moment longer than they needed to. "Thank you, Emma," he said, and then he left. But the quiet he left behind felt different than before. Not empty, just unresolved. Later that afternoon, the cafe filled with its usual soft chaos. Shopping bags, stroller wheels, hurried conversations. I was wiping down a table when 2 women who came in often for iced tea took their seats near the counter. One of them leaned in conspiratorially. "You know that man who sits by the window sometimes?" she asked. My heart gave itself away by beating too quickly. "Hmm?" She lowered her voice, like the cafe itself was listening. "He's the owner of the entire building." I froze. The words didn't make sense at first. They sounded like gossip or exaggeration or a joke. But the woman wasn't joking. She said it casually, confidently, like it was common knowledge. "Daniel Hale," she continued. "His family owns most of this block, actually. The cafe, the bookstore, the apartments above. Old money." "I think." Her friend nodded. "His father used to be in real estate. Big developer. The kind of people who are on boards and in newspapers and all that. I tried to swallow. The coffee shop suddenly felt too warm. The cup in my hand felt too light. My life felt too small. I had rejected him, turned him down. And the whole time, I didn't know. No, that wasn't the part that hit me hardest. What struck me was that he never told me. Not once. Not even hinted. He could have used it. He could have tried to impress me. But he didn't. He just sat at a wooden table, wearing a quiet coat, drinking whatever I handed him. And I realized something. I had judged him by my fears, not by who he actually was. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Have you ever felt like your life is being decided without you? And I realized I understood him more than I had allowed myself to admit. Maybe we were the same, in a way neither of us had expected. Both living lives that looked fine from the outside, both quietly longing for something we couldn't quite name. The next morning, I made a decision. I didn't know if it was brave or foolish. Maybe both. Most meaningful things are. I wrote a note on a small piece of paper and tucked it into my apron pocket before the cafe opened. It simply read, "If you want to walk sometime, I would like that. Emma." I didn't know if he would come, or if he would care, or if I had already missed whatever quiet chance had existed between us. But I knew that if I stayed silent, I would carry that silence for a long time. He came in at noon, not morning, not early, not predictable. He walked to the counter and gave a small, almost shy smile. "Good afternoon," he said. And for the first time since meeting him, I felt the possibility of something unfolding. I placed the note beside his drink, not with ceremony, not with explanation, just gently. His hand hovered over the paper for a moment. Then he picked it up and read it. His eyes lifted. Something inside them warmed, opened, became very real. "I would like that too," he said. Just like that. Simple, clear, honest, and something shifted inside me. Not sharp like lightning, not loud like realization. Softly, like a door opening in a quiet room. We didn't know it yet. But this was where everything began. Not the cafe, not the coffee, not the first hello, but this small agreement to step outside our separate worlds, together, even if we had no idea what waited on the other side. I did not know how long I sat there after the door clicked shut. The room felt too large, like it had swallowed me whole. The light outside the window had changed from afternoon gold to a deeper orange, the color of embers trying to stay alive. His teacup sat across from mine, untouched. The steam had faded. Everything felt like it was fading, but the truth he left behind stayed sharp. I took a slow breath, then another. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. More like something inside me had cracked open, and now everything I thought I understood was shifting. I whispered to the quiet room, "Why me?" It was not a sad question. Not anymore. Not desperate. Just real. Why did my life, so simple and invisible, keep crossing with lives like his? I didn't get an answer. Silence just sat with me. I finally stood up, washed the cups, and wiped the counter. My movements were small, gentle, like I was afraid I might break something important if I made a sudden noise. I needed air. I stepped out into the evening and walked. The city was glowing in that magical hour, where everything looks softer, kinder, almost forgiving. Car lights blurred. People laughed outside cafes. Someone played piano from an open window. I walked without a direction, only with a feeling. Like my feet knew something I didn't. And then I found myself at the hospital. The glass doors slid open and everything smelled familiar again. Clean, quiet, honest. It felt like the place where everything had begun, where I had sat, scared and hopeful, giving a part of myself to someone I did not know. Where that one act started a chain I never saw coming. I went to the receptionist, smiling softly at her surprise. "Can I see her?" I asked. The woman blinked. "You mean the patient who received your blood?" I nodded. She hesitated. "She's stable now, but visits are limited. Only family is allowed." I pressed my palm lightly to my chest. Sometimes family isn't just. The hallway felt long, lined with quiet footsteps and shadows. My heart beat steady, but slow, like it knew this moment mattered. When I reached the door, the world got quiet. I pushed it open. She was sleeping. A young girl, no older than 13. Her hair was thin, her skin pale, but her face looked peaceful. There were flowers on the table and a handmade card with drawings of stars. I stepped closer. She had been a stranger, just a name in a medical system. A call asking if I would help, and I had said yes without thinking twice. Seeing her now, breathing, alive, something inside me settled. Not everything in my life was fragile. Some things were strong. Some things did matter. A soft rustle broke the silence. A woman was sitting in the corner. I hadn't noticed her at first because she blinked. Her eyes were tired, but when she saw me, warmth filled them. Not curiosity, recognition. "You're her donor," she whispered. I nodded. She stood slowly, like she was afraid the moment might crack if she moved too fast. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. I smiled, and my voice came out steady. "You don't have to. I'm glad she's getting better." The mother looked at her daughter with a kind of love that felt like it could lift mountains. "She wouldn't be here without you." I did not know what to say to that, so I just breathed. Then the woman stepped closer. Her expression shifted. The warmth stayed, but something else appeared. Something aware. "You're the reason he came back," she said softly. I blinked. "Who?" She gave me a look, gentle but knowing. "The man who was here earlier. The one who left flowers and sat by her bed for hours. He came back because of you." My heart lifted and fell at the same time. "He was here?" I asked. She nodded. "He told my daughter a story about a girl he once met. A girl who did something kind, without expecting anything in return. He told her that kindness is a kind of courage, the kind that changes lives." Her voice wavered. "He said your name like it meant something to him." I felt the air shift inside my lungs. The world slowed. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. The woman put her hand gently over mine. A quiet, grateful touch. "Whatever is between you," she whispered, "don't run from it." I held her hand back, soft, steady. Then I left the room. The hallway felt different now. Lighter, like something had opened instead of closed. Outside, the sky was deep violet. The first stars were showing. I walked home with slow steps, not because I didn't know where to go, but because I finally did. When I reached my door, I paused. Someone was sitting on the steps. His suit jacket was folded beside him. His sleeves were rolled to his elbows. His hair was a little messy, like the wind had been speaking to him. He looked up at me. No walls this time, no armor, just him. "I wasn't sure you'd come back," he said. "I wasn't sure either," I replied. We stood there, the world holding its breath around us. He rose to his feet. His voice was quiet, steady. "I left because I needed to tell you the truth," he said. "But I came back because I didn't want the truth to push you away." I felt something settle inside me. Not an answer, just readiness. "Then say it," I whispered. He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel his warmth. "I am afraid," he said. "Afraid of how much you mean to me." The evening held us close. I did not run. I looked at him, really looked, and I said the first true thing that came to my heart. "So am I." The air between us felt worn and fragile, like a candle flame that could be blown out with just one wrong word. We stood on the steps outside my apartment, evening gathering around us like a soft blanket. City sounds moved in the background, distant cars, murmurs, a dog barking somewhere. But here in the small space between us, everything was quiet. He didn't try to touch me. He didn't rush. He just waited. And for the first time, I realized waiting was a language too, one only spoken by people who cared. "I don't know what this is," I said quietly, "between us." His eyes softened, that gentle, melting look he had when something mattered deeply to him. "I don't either," he admitted, "but it's real. Real." The word felt like a match, lighting something slow and strong inside my chest. I was tired of running from real. I opened the door, and without asking, without explaining, I stepped inside, then stopped and looked back at him. It wasn't an invitation spoken aloud, but he understood it. He followed. The apartment felt smaller with him inside it, not in a suffocating way, but in the way someone's presence fills a room. He didn't look around or examine anything. He wasn't searching for clues about who I was. He was looking at me. I sat on the edge of the couch. He sat beside me, leaving space, enough to feel safe, close enough to feel seen. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The quiet felt new, not heavy, just honest. Finally, he let out a breath, slow and steady. "There's something else," he said. I turned to face him, heart steady, ready. He ran a hand through his hair, searching for the right words. "The girl in the hospital, the one you helped, she's my sister." The world didn't break. It simply shifted. Pieces clicked quietly into place. The urgent hospital call, his presence that first day, the way he looked at me, not with curiosity, but recognition. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the truth settle, like a leaf drifting to the bottom of a lake. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked softly. He swallowed. His voice was rough when he answered, "Because I was afraid that if you knew, you'd think I only came back into your life out of obligation, or gratitude, or debt. And I couldn't bear that." I looked at him, really looked. He had money, power, influence. He could have thanked me with flowers or donations or a polite letter on expensive paper. But instead, he returned to me, not because he owed me something, but because something in me called to something in him. I reached for his hand, not dramatic, not shaking, just steady. His fingers closed around mine slowly, like he was afraid the moment might vanish if he moved too quickly. "I didn't help her because I wanted something back," I said. "I know." His voice was a whisper. "That's why I couldn't stay away." Silence again. but now it felt warm. We sat like that for a long time, hands linked, breathing in rhythm without meaning to. I didn't ask what would happen next. He didn't promise anything too large to hold. The moment didn't need a future yet. It was enough on its own. Eventually, the room darkened until only the glow of the streetlight slipped through the curtains, painting everything a soft amber. He spoke again, quieter than before. "She asked about you, you know? My sister. She wanted to know your name," I told her. "And she said, 'Tell her I want to grow up to be like her.'" My breath caught. Not from pain, not from shock. From something gentler. Something that felt like being seen. Truly seen for the first time. I didn't cry. The tears didn't come this time. Instead, I felt a soft warmth behind my ribs, like a small light turning on in a dark room that had waited for years. He leaned back against the couch, head tilted slightly, eyes closed, like he was letting himself rest for the first time in a very long while. Without thinking, I gently rested my shoulder against his. He didn't move. He didn't tense. He simply breathed, in and out, like this was the place his body already knew how to return to. We didn't kiss. There were no grand declarations. Just presence. Two lives, previously running on separate tracks, now sitting quietly side by side. Not merged yet, but no longer strangers, traveling past each other in the night. Eventually, he opened his eyes and looked at me. "I don't want to rush this," he said. "Good," I replied. "I don't want rushed things. I want truthful ones." His hand tightened around mine, just slightly. "Then we take it slow," he said. "Slow," I echoed. "Not fragile. Not uncertain. Just real." The night held us like a secret, quiet and beautiful in its simplicity. And somewhere far away, in a hospital room filled with flowers and soft monitors, a girl slept peacefully, her future held gently by the kindness of strangers who were not strangers anymore. We didn't define what we were to each other. There were no labels or promises, no whispered forevers, no rushing ahead of the moment. We simply moved through days that felt gentler because we were in them together. In the weeks that followed, he began to appear in the quiet spaces of my everyday life, like a melody I recognized before I knew the song. Some mornings, I would come downstairs to the café and find him already seated by the window, 2 cups of coffee waiting, one black with a little honey, just how I liked it. He didn't make a big show of remembering. He simply placed the cup in front of me and continued whatever thought he was already saying, as if my presence was something natural, something expected, something welcome. We talked about everything and nothing. Favorite childhood books, the way rain sounds different depending on where it falls, the color a sky turns before a storm. We told stories that didn't matter and secrets we didn't know we'd been carrying. I told him how I'd always been afraid of being too much, too emotional, too hopeful, too tender, the kind of softness the world called naive. He listened, not like someone gathering information, but like someone witnessing. "It's not softness that gets someone hurt," he said. "It's giving it to the wrong hands." My chest tightened, not with hurt, but with recognition. We didn't hold hands yet. We didn't kiss. But there were moments our shoulders brushed, and I felt it for hours afterward, like a spark that settled somewhere inside my ribs and refused to go out. Sometimes we walked along the river at dusk, watching lights flicker across the water. He always walked slightly closer to the street than I did, a quiet, instinctive gesture. He didn't point it out. He didn't make it noble. He just did it. Kindness was his language, and slowly I began to speak it back. One evening, he asked if I wanted to visit the hospital with him, to see his sister. She was recovering well, but still weak, still fragile, in the way someone looks when life has let them return, but only on the condition that they move carefully now. The girl's name was Lily. She was younger than I expected, maybe 13. Small, bright eyes, hair pulled back in a short braid. The kind of hopeful smile that made you feel protective without meaning to. When she saw me in the doorway, her face lit up in a way I didn't expect. "You're the girl," she said, like she was announcing something important. "The one I told you about," she added, turning to her brother. He looked embarrassed at that, in the tender sort of way. And just like that, I understood. He cherished her, not just as family, but as a reason. A purpose. A heart tether. I sat beside her bed, and she told me about school, and the books she loved, and the fact that she wanted to become a doctor one day because she wanted to give back life the way it was given back to her. The air in the room trembled, gently, like something holy. When we left the hospital, we walked in silence for several blocks. The sky was turning the deep, bruised purple of evening, streetlights flickering on one by one, like someone was whispering the world awake again. He stopped beside a closed bakery, hands in his pockets. "You changed her life," he said quietly. "You changed mine." I felt my throat tighten, not the dramatic, overflowing kind of emotion, just a soft fullness, like my heart had grown to hold something new. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't speak at all. I simply leaned my head gently against his shoulder. He exhaled, slow, like a door unlocking. We stood like that for a long time, neither of us moving, both of us knowing something had shifted. Not in a loud way, in a peaceful one, like a page turning itself. The days that followed felt like something warm and steady, a rhythm, something that didn't need explanation or decoration. One night, he cooked dinner at my apartment, pasta, lightly seasoned, the way someone cooks when they were taught to pay attention rather than impress. He moved in my kitchen like he belonged there, humming under his breath, opening drawers like he somehow already knew where things were. We ate quietly, our knees brushing under the table. It felt safe. It felt earned. It felt like home. I didn't realize how deeply I had let him in. Not until later. Because slowly, almost too slowly, to notice, something else began to change. It was small at first. A hesitation before he answered certain questions. A flicker in his eyes when his phone buzzed. A pause in his voice when I asked where he had been before we met. Not distance, just something unspoken. Something kept carefully behind a door he wasn't ready to open. One night, we were sitting in the cafe after closing time. The world outside was dark, and we were the only two people in the room. He was telling me a story about his childhood, about how he used to build little model cities from cardboard when he was a boy. I laughed and said, "I can picture that. You designing tiny worlds." He smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. I didn't know why, not then, but the moment passed like a cloud across sunlight, fast and quiet, leaving only the faint shadow of its shape. And I felt something shift. Not wrong, not frightening, just real. Love, I realized, wasn't just light. It carried shadows too. Shadows of pasts unspoken. Shadows of fears unnamed. Shadows of truths not yet ready to be shown. I wanted to believe nothing had changed, but deep down, beneath the warmth, beneath the closeness, I already knew. A story always changes right before it turns. We didn't fall in love all at once. It happened the way morning light slips across a room, slowly, softly, so gently that you don't notice the darkness disappearing until suddenly everything is warm. Some evenings, he would walk me home, his hands tucked in his coat pockets, our steps unconsciously matching. Other nights, we stayed at my apartment, talking until we both grew quiet from the weight of our own thoughts. The beautiful thing was how easy everything felt. There was no chase, no performance, no need to pretend. Love didn't feel like being swept away. It felt like finding ground. One Saturday morning, we took a bus outside the city to a small botanical garden he said he used to visit as a child. I thought it would be crowded, but it was almost empty, just a few older couples walking slowly along the stone paths. The air smelled like damp earth and lilac. He walked beside me, not leading, not following, just beside. There was a small pond near the center of the garden, surrounded by tall reeds. A wooden bench leaned slightly to one side, worn smooth by time. We sat there and watched the water ripple in slow rings. After a while, he spoke. "When my father died," he said quietly, "this was the place my mother brought me. She said that grief needs open sky, that sorrow can't breathe indoors." I turned to look at him, surprised by his openness. He wasn't someone who spoke about pain easily. There was a tightness in his jaw, not from holding back tears, but from holding back memory. I didn't say "I'm sorry." It felt too small for what he had offered me. Instead, I rested my hand on top of his, palm to back, the way one places a leaf gently to keep it from blowing away. He didn't move, but his breathing changed, deeper, slower, as if something in him had been unknotted, just a little. "When I was younger," I said softly, "I thought love was supposed to be loud, dramatic, like the movies. But now I think," I paused, searching for the right shape of feeling, "I think it's this, just being known." He didn't answer. He simply turned his hand under mine and held it. No declaration. Just truth. The kind that doesn't need applause. There were moments when I caught him watching me in a way that made my breath stop. Not with desire, though that was there too. Quiet and patient and growing stronger each day, but with a kind of tenderness that felt older than us. Like he had been waiting for me long before we ever met. We weren't lovers yet, but love had already arrived. It lived in the way I said his name. It lived in the way he opened every door gently, as if the world were fragile. It lived in how he listened. One evening, he invited me to dinner at a small restaurant tucked between two bookshops, a place with soft lighting and tablecloths that didn't try too hard. We talked over pasta and wine that tasted like summer held in a bottle. He looked lighter that night, almost youthful, like a man who had finally let himself believe in something good. After dinner, he walked me home. Not all the way, just to the corner of my block, where the streetlight cast a golden circle around us. The night felt warm, and a breeze moved gently through the leaves of the trees. We stood facing each other. No rush, no urgency, just the moment. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. A small gesture, but my heartbeat stuttered. His hand remained there, near my cheek, and I leaned into it without meaning to. He didn't pull me in. He didn't close the distance. He simply held the moment open, like a door waiting to be walked through. And I was the one who moved. I stepped closer, just enough that our foreheads touched. The world felt quiet. He whispered, May I? Not, can I kiss you? Not, do you want this? Just that one question. Gentle, reverent, as if my heart were something sacred. Yes, I breathed. And when he kissed me, it wasn't fireworks. It was a candle being lit in a dark room. Warm, steady, certain. The kind of kiss that doesn't ask to be remembered, because it changes you, and therefore can never be forgotten. The days after that were golden. We fell into a rhythm that felt like music. We laughed more easily. We moved more closely. We breathed more deeply. And for a while, a beautiful, small while, it felt like the story had found its ending early. Like all that was left was to live inside the softness we had built. But life, I have learned, never rests for long. Just when everything reaches its warmest point, when the heart grows comfortable, that is when truth begins to stir. It started with a phone call. Late, past midnight. His phone lit up on my nightstand. He had fallen asleep beside me for the first time. Truly asleep, his breathing slow and unguarded. The name on the screen wasn't one I recognized, but the expression on his face when he woke, the sharp inhale, the quick swipe to silence the call, that I recognized. Fear. Not of danger, of exposure. He didn't look at me. He didn't explain. He just said, "I have to go," and was out the door before his shoes were even fully on. The door closed softly. Not slammed, but somehow the quiet hurt more. I sat there in the dark, the room still warm with his presence, and felt something cold settle just beneath my ribs. Not heartbreak, not yet. Just the first whisper of something shifting. Something I didn't have a name for. Not then, but I would soon. The next few days were strange. He returned, yes, always with that same calm, effortless grace. But the rhythm we had grown used to felt fractured. A subtle tension clung to the air between us, almost imperceptible, like smoke from a candle burning too close to the wall. I caught myself scanning his face for hints, for cracks, for anything that could explain the sudden distance. "Are you all right?" I asked one morning as he stirred his coffee, the sunlight catching the faint silver at his temples. He nodded, just once, with a polite smile. "Yes, just busy." Busy. The word sounded hollow, even to him, I thought. I didn't press. I wanted to. But there was a quiet fear growing inside me that asking too many questions would push the fragile world we had built off its axis. It wasn't just the absences. It was the silences. The way he would sit at my side, laugh at my small jokes, yet his mind seemed somewhere else entirely. A weight behind his eyes I couldn't reach. One evening, we went for a walk along the river. The city lights shimmered on the water, silver and gold like fragments of forgotten dreams. I took his hand, weaving our fingers together, as I always did. "Tell me what's happening," I said softly. He squeezed my hand gently, but did not speak. Just looked down at the shimmering water, the current carrying tiny reflections of our unspoken truths. Finally, he said, "Emma, some things are complicated." The word hung between us, like fog over a bridge. "Complicated how?" I pressed, trying to keep my voice steady. He shook his head, eyes still on the river. "I can't explain it yet, not everything." I nodded, but my chest tightened. There was a pause, then he added, almost to himself, "I want you to know you're the most important thing to me." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that nothing could touch the bond we had built. but a sliver of unease had wormed its way inside me. The subtle cracks became moments I couldn't ignore. He would receive phone calls, step outside without explanation, return with a faint tension that made me ache in places I didn't know were exposed. Sometimes he seemed to vanish for hours, not distant in voice, but absent in presence. One morning, I walked to the cafe earlier than usual. The city had that soft, pre-dawn glow, and I expected to find him waiting by the window as always, but he wasn't there. The chair was empty, the cup untouched. I waited and waited. When he finally appeared, there was an unspoken weight to his steps. The ease had gone. He smiled when he saw me, polite, careful, but I could see it, the hesitation behind the light in his eyes. I wanted to ask. I wanted to demand, but I only whispered, "Where were you?" He exhaled, like he had been holding his breath for far too long. Had to handle something, some things. I nodded, pretended to understand, but deep down, I didn't. The tension grew in subtle ways. At dinner, he would pick at his food, staring at me with a distracted air. While walking, he would glance at his phone more often than usual. Even our laughter felt slightly forced, like we were rehearsing moments we used to live naturally. One night, after a quiet walk, I found myself sitting on the curb outside my apartment, staring at the streetlights, trying to make sense of it. He crouched beside me, his shoulder brushing mine. "I'm trying," he whispered. That single phrase was enough to break me. Not because it was small, but because it was honest. I wanted to hold him. I wanted to tell him that honesty alone was enough. But I didn't. I could feel the first real fracture of our story, the kind you feel in your bones before it reaches your heart. There were small, almost imperceptible moments that signaled something bigger. A text received in secrecy, a smile that didn't reach his eyes, a phone call he left unanswered in my presence. I began to notice patterns, the way his hand would tremble just slightly when answering certain calls, or the way he would glance around before stepping. And the truth began to form in the quiet spaces between us. He was holding something back. Something significant. Something that could change everything. I didn't want to see it. I wanted to believe the pauses were just life, the distance just timing, the absences just coincidences. But hearts are instinctive, and mine told me otherwise. The night ended quietly, the streetlights casting long shadows across the pavement. He walked me to my door. His hand brushed mine. Soft and careful. "I'll call you tomorrow," he said. I nodded, forcing a smile I didn't feel. When the door closed behind me, I leaned against it, letting the weight of the day settle. I wanted to believe everything was fine, but deep down I already knew. The story had begun to shift. Something hidden was waiting to rise. And soon, there would be no turning back. The first time I felt it, really felt it, was subtle. He was late again, standing in the doorway with that practiced smile, but something in his eyes was distant, cold almost, though he tried to hide it. I wanted to ask him where he had been. I wanted to believe it was work, that it was just life catching up to him. But my heart knew otherwise. The days that followed became a string of quiet alarms. He answered my calls less often. Sometimes not at all. When we were together, he seemed distracted, like his mind was carrying some invisible weight I wasn't allowed to touch. I caught him glancing at his phone in ways that made my stomach twist. The screen would light up with names I didn't know, messages I couldn't read, calls he wouldn't answer in front of me. One evening, he left in the middle of a conversation, his excuse thin, his voice too steady, and the apartment felt hollow when he closed the door behind him. I paced, my chest tight. Something had changed. I could feel it. I tried to ignore the warning signs. I told myself it was temporary, that the world was complicated, that he was complicated. But the unease grew like a shadow in the corners of the room. I started noticing little inconsistencies. A story he told twice, but in slightly different ways. Names that didn't match. Places he said he went that didn't make sense. And then I saw it. I wasn't snooping, not really. I had no intention. I had gone to pick up his jacket from the chair he left it on. His phone had slid out of the pocket. It lit up on the table. The name on the screen wasn't mine. It wasn't someone I had met. It was her. My hands froze. My heart stuttered. The room felt suddenly too bright, too sharp, too loud. I stared at the screen as if staring hard enough could erase what I was seeing. He didn't know I had seen it. I had enough sense to hide, to hold my breath until he returned. And when he did, it wasn't the warmth I remembered. His smile was small, strained. His eyes flicked to mine, and I saw it. Hesitation, fear, guilt. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Who is she?" I asked, quiet but firm. He paused. He looked away. He ran a hand through his hair, like he was untangling himself from something he had wrapped too tightly around his chest. "It's complicated," he said finally. I felt my chest collapse a little. "Complicated?" I echoed. "Or are you hiding something from me?" He shook his head. "It's not what you think." I wanted to believe him. I needed to. But the weight in my chest, the undeniable dread, told me the truth had already begun to land. The next hours were a blur of questions I couldn't ask and answers I couldn't trust. He left the apartment again, this time without explanation. I sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the space where he had been. My hands were trembling, but not from cold, from realization, from betrayal. Everything we had built, every laugh, every quiet touch, every small, perfect moment, felt suddenly fragile, temporary, shattered. I replayed the last few weeks in my mind. The absences, the silences, the phone calls, the way he had held his hand in mine, but seemed to keep some distance behind his eyes. The truth had been there all along. I just hadn't wanted to see it. When he finally returned, the confrontation didn't happen with yelling or tears. It happened with quiet. We sat across from each other at my kitchen table, the last light of day filtering through the blinds. I didn't scream. I didn't shout. I only asked, softly, almost whispering, "Who are you, really?" He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw it all. The fear, the hesitation, the regret. His voice faltered. "I wanted to tell you. I planned to. But I didn't know how." My chest ached, not from anger, not from betrayal, but from the sudden collapse of everything I had trusted. "You were hiding your life from me," I said, my voice breaking, "from the start." He reached for my hand, but I pulled back. "I didn't want contact, not now." "I didn't lie," he said. "Not really. I just didn't tell you everything. I wanted you to know me, not all the complications." "All the complications," I repeated. My lips trembled. "All the things you are? You didn't think I deserved to know the truth?" He looked down, shame and regret etched in every line of his face. I thought I could protect you from it, from me. But protection doesn't feel like this. This hollow ache in my chest, this sudden vertigo of trust unraveling. That night, I walked the city streets alone. The wind felt sharp against my skin, biting in a way that mirrored the ache inside. Every light seemed too bright, every shadow too heavy. The places we had walked together, the river, the quiet cafes, the botanical gardens, felt alien, like someone else had walked there with me. My apartment, once a refuge, felt empty, cold. I sat by the window and watched the city below. Cars glimmered past, streetlights flickered, people moved in rhythms that had nothing to do with my heartache. And I realized the story I had believed in, the one I had trusted, was gone. It wasn't about him lying. It was about him not being fully present, about hiding parts of himself that mattered, parts that now felt like walls between us. I didn't cry at first. I just let the silence hold me. The days that followed were quiet but unbearable. I saw him occasionally, at the hospital, at the cafe, but each meeting was brief, awkward, strained. He tried. He sent messages, apologized, explained, but no words could fill the emptiness his absence had carved. I walked past our favorite spots, tracing memories like fragile glass, afraid they would shatter beneath my fingers. Even Lily's bright smile, once a balm, now reminded me of the life we could have had, the trust I had offered freely, and how easily it had been fractured. I sat on the riverbank one evening, the water dark and still beneath the bridge. I didn't want to forgive. I didn't want to move on. I just wanted to understand. And in that stillness, I realized heartbreak wasn't loud. It was subtle. It was empty spaces. It was the quiet ache of having believed something whole, only to see it dissolve. But even in that despair, a small flicker remained. A quiet, stubborn spark that whispered, "You will rise from this. You will start again." I didn't know how yet. I didn't know when. But for the first time since the collapse, I felt a tiny pulse of clarity. I would survive this. I would find my footing again. And I would learn that love, even when it breaks you, leaves something behind. A faint glimmer of who you are and who you might still become. The apartment was quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of mornings with him nearby. Not the soft hum of shared laughter. This was the quiet of emptiness. The kind that presses against your ears and fills the space between your thoughts with echoes of absence. Cups still sat on the table from nights I hadn't had the strength to clean. A notebook lay open on the couch, pages curled, half-written thoughts abandoned. Pictures of ordinary days, of moments that once mattered, stared back at me from the frames, frozen and unchanging. I walked from room to room slowly, almost reverently, tracing the shadows of our past. Each corner, each chair, each stray pen reminded me of him, of what had been, and of what had quietly unraveled beneath the weight of secrets. For days, I barely spoke. Even my reflection in the mirror felt foreign, unfamiliar. And yet, amid that silence, I began to feel the first faint stirrings of myself again. I sat on the windowsill, watching the city move below. Life carried on in its usual rhythm. People walking dogs, cars slipping over asphalt, streetlights flickering on, one by one. It was ordinary, mundane, yet profoundly alive. I thought about everything that had happened. About trust and vulnerability, about hope and disappointment, about how a single encounter, one I had rejected unknowingly at the cafe months before, could set a chain of events in motion that would reshape an entire life. I didn't dwell on anger. I didn't let bitterness settle. Instead, I reflected. I started small. I made coffee in the morning and opened the window, letting the cool air fill the kitchen. The scent of wet leaves and the faint city hum slipped inside like a promise. I sat at the table and simply breathed. I began walking again, through streets I had once walked with him. This time, I noticed details I hadn't before. A shop window with hand-painted letters, a stray cat curled on a doorstep, the rhythm of my own steps echoing beneath the pavement. I smiled at strangers, not for anyone, not as a performance, but because I could. Because I had discovered a simple truth. The world continued, and so could I. Letters I had written him, unsent, I gathered into a small box. I didn't destroy them, I couldn't, but I placed them carefully on the highest shelf in my closet. They were no longer part of my present, but a quiet acknowledgement of what had been. Sometimes, I caught myself imagining him, imagining his life moving forward, imagining him smiling again. And I didn't feel resentment. I didn't feel longing. I felt something closer to peace, because finally, I was learning that love isn't only about being with someone. It's about honoring yourself. It's about holding your own heart gently, giving it space to mend and grow. The afternoons became a ritual of slow, deliberate steps. I visited the cafe again, alone. Savoring the taste of coffee I could now drink without the weight of expectation. I wandered through the botanical garden, the pond reflecting sunlight in small, glimmering ripples. Life had its own way of healing. Subtle, patient, quiet. One evening, sitting by the riverbank, I noticed the reflection of streetlights dancing on the water, and I realized that the currents I once feared could also carry beauty, that the endings I had dreaded could still leave space for beginnings. And in that moment, I understood something profound. Heartbreak, while devastating, is not the erasure of the self. It is a chance to rediscover it, to sift through the pieces of your heart and notice which ones are yours to keep, which ones are yours to shape. I had been taught that love defines you. I had learned that it also teaches you. Sometimes, the people who break us are the ones who teach us how to stand again. I didn't know if I would ever see him again. Perhaps I would, perhaps I wouldn't, but it no longer mattered. The life I had, the quiet mornings, the river, the streets bathed in light, belonged to me. And in that quiet reclamation, I smiled, not because life had been perfect, not because love had been simple, but because I had chosen myself. And that choice, simple, deliberate, unshakable, felt like the first true happiness I had ever known. I walked home that evening beneath the soft glow of the streetlights. The world was quiet but not empty. The air smelled like rain and possibility. I realized that love, like the city around me, moves in currents. Sometimes it lifts you. Sometimes it leaves you stranded. But eventually it teaches you to navigate your own course. I paused at my apartment door. For a long moment, I just stood there, feeling the pulse of my own heartbeat, steady and sure. The past was a story I had lived, rich and flawed and beautiful. The future was a story I would write, alone, yes, but fully, unafraid, and open to all its unexpected turns. And for the first time in months, I felt entirely and quietly free.